Hello everyone, my name is Yara and it's been a long time since I made a video. So just for the record, I did not mean to take this long of a hiatus. I really did intend to probably only take a short break, like a month or a few months, and then come back, but every single time I tried to come back, something came up or I was too busy or I just didn't have the energy to come back. And so I kind of just wanted to talk about where I've been, what kind of my mindset has been about the book community and making content for book internet spheres. Because I feel like my relationship to reading, to making content has changed a lot, and so I thought it would be fun to talk about. And I'm going to be doing my makeup during this video, so I have something to do. So the first question probably is, where have I been this whole time? And I think I mentioned it previously that I am a pre-med student, so I'm trying to go to medical school. And with that comes a lot of different requirements and experiences that you need to get in order to be competitive and create a competitive application. I need to like pin my hair up. And basically, going into college, I had this like 4-year plan of what I was going to do every year, each summer, had everything lined up so that I would be most competitive when I was going to apply to med school. And if you don't know about the med school application cycle in the US, basically if you want to be able to attend medical school immediately after you graduate undergrad, you have to apply at the end of your junior year or third year. So basically you have to try to fit everything that you need, including things like research, clinical experience. Again, not everything you need, but you know, there's kind of like a pre-med checklist, even though it shouldn't be a checklist, but that's neither here nor there. But you basically want to complete everything that would make you competitive for med school by the end of your third year. So like I said, I had this whole plan, but in my sophomore year, COVID happened. And so we all went online, nothing was open, and specifically a lot of healthcare facilities were not open to things like volunteering, which was where I was planning to get a lot of my clinical hours from. Clinical hours meaning like time in a medical clinic, interacting with patients. And in the beginning of that time, I really did not think that COVID was going to impact the world for such a long time. I was kind of like, yeah, we're going to go back to normal by the fall or at least the next year. So I still had hope that like my plan could still follow through. But time and time went on and we were still in a pandemic and it was going increasingly hard to find opportunities because most things required some sort of certification, like either an EMT certification or medical assistant certification, which I did not have. And I wasn't sure if it would be worth the money to obtain at that point, because there's just so many variables about when things were going to open up. And so basically it got all the way up to the point where I was about to take my MCAT. Like I was like a week out. And I came to this realization, like, no matter how well I do on this MCAT, I am not going to be competitive for medical school because I don't have clinical experience. And like that's like the one part of your application that can really make or break your application. Like you can have everything else fine, but if you don't have clinical experience, then a lot of schools will just dismiss you. And so while I had that breakdown before the MCAT, I was kind of like, okay, shut up, stop thinking about this, just take your MCAT and then think about that later. Which I did, and I did well, and then afterwards I really had to contemplate what I was going to do. It basically ended up being the question of whether I was going to take a gap year or not. And going into this like pre-med journey, I wasn't against gap years, like theoretically. A lot of people did them. I think the stat is like only 40% of people go straight from undergrad, so 60% have taken at least one gap year. So it's very normal and very common, but a gap year was just not something that I had ever envisioned for myself because like I said, I had this whole plan. I had everything mapped out. After consulting like so many resources, both in person and online, I basically came to the conclusion that yes, I did need a gap year. Well, need might not be the right word. Could I have gotten in somewhere? Probably, but I would have exponentially increased my chances of getting into, or at least have more options of getting into more places. And what actually played into a lot of my decision about whether to take a gap year or not was the fact that a lot of the things that had been postponed because of COVID were basically just delayed before the summer of my senior year. And so I would have things to put on my application, even aside from clinical experience, like things like leadership, just different opportunities and research that I think would have severely helped my application, and that I think my application would have suffered without them. But they were all going to be after I would have had to already submit my application if I was applying traditionally. And so I did eventually just come to the conclusion that it would be in my best interest to take a gap year and basically delay my application for a year. But it was definitely a hard decision, especially as a child of immigrants. My parents and so much of my family were just so against the idea of a gap year because they thought I was kind of wasting time and I was wasting a year of my life. Because in their country, it's not even the norm to have undergrad and then med school. You go straight into med school. So yeah, it took a lot of convincing them and using all those stats about how common it is to take a gap year, and also just reiterating that basically I would have so many more opportunities if I did take this gap year. And so yeah, that kind of leads me into why I had to kind of stop making videos for a while. It was just because I was doing all of these things that had been deferred because of COVID, all basically in my senior year, in order to make sure that I had a good application for med school. And making video content just kind of had to go on the back burner. Even reading, I did not read a lot the last couple of years. 2022, I only read 20 books, which I guess is more than a lot of people, and I should be proud of that, but it's just definitely a lot lower than what I usually do. And so obviously if you're not reading, it's really hard to make content. And so fast forward to now, I'm currently in my gap year while I'm applying to medical school. I've been doing research in neuroscience, which has been really interesting, though kind of exhausting to go kind of from school into the workforce. And now I have been admitted into med school, so I will be attending a med school next year. Getting that acceptance took such a weight off of my shoulder because the application cycle is brutal. It is so much work. Those 3 months in the whole summer basically, where I was doing my primary application and my secondary application, because basically there's 2 waves. Your primary application is where you put all of your activities and personal statement and that stuff, and then each school sends you their own set of questions they want you to answer. That process took 3 months, and it was basically a part-time job. It was exhausting, and you have to really dig deep into all of your experiences in your life and really reflect. And I was just so happy to note that I didn't have to do that again. I really have so much respect for people who go through the cycle multiple times. It is really a test of endurance and resilience. Okay, and so now kind of my relationship to reading, making bookish content, and all that stuff. And so obviously everything that I just mentioned contributed to why I wasn't really reading that much. But I also wasn't really consuming a lot of bookish content for a long time. I got really addicted to TikTok, but I wasn't really on Book Talk, which was really surprising for me. I know I could have sought it out, but it didn't appear in my feed initially. And I really found that my consumption of bookish content really correlates to how invested and interested in I am in actually reading, because you discover a lot of books, and also other people's enthusiasm and passion about books makes me want to read them, and I think that had a lot to do with why I wasn't reading a lot. And the transition from YouTube to TikTok I think also had to do with kind of how I was changing, because I used to obviously primarily consume BookTube for years, and then now suddenly there's a new platform in TikTok. And you know that when you initially stumble into Book Talk, most of the content you received is a lot of romance, a lot of fantasy romance, honestly a lot of books that were kind of already popular on BookTube, like ACOTAR, The Cruel Prince, things like that. And a lot of them were books that I wasn't really interested in, especially within romance. I'm not really a romance reader. I kind of want to try it. I've only tried 2 romance books, but that's beside the point. So it was basically kind of I was already drifting away from watching YouTube, and then even though I was on TikTok, the book content that I was seeing on TikTok was not necessarily things that I was excited about, and so ultimately I wasn't as excited about becoming invested in that book community, which is totally wrong, because I realized, obviously, once you curate your own space, you will find the book talkers that read what you read and can give you recommendations, which is what I have now. TikTok is an algorithm, but you also have to kind of give it feedback and search for your own things in order for it to give you stuff that you actually want to consume. But yeah, for a long time, I just kind of felt distant from the book community because, one, it was changing, and then I wasn't really making videos anymore. And a whole other part of this conversation is kind of how fast you have to be in order to just make any content on the internet, especially with TikTok now. topics and trends come and go so fast in like discourse that it feels like if you don't talk about it right now, it's just going to be so irrelevant. And that's really exhausting and demoralizing if you don't have a lot of time to make content. And by the time you actually would want to make something, it's already not relevant anymore. And also a lot of the content that I want to make and I have a lot of ideas about just inherently takes more time than I have. Like I really like consuming video analyses and video essays, and I always have so many ideas about what I could do in relation to books and just media representation in general. But again, I want to make sure that what I put out there is well researched or just well thought out and well structured. And then when you're already kind of burnt out from life in general and tired, it's really hard to put that into a hobby like this. And so basically where I am now is that I've kind of reached that point where I have kind of got back into the book internet sphere, kind of have been consuming TikToks that relate and get me excited about reading. I've just been reading more. I've been watching YouTube again, so I feel like I've just kind of been back into it and feel more inspired to actually make videos and get back on here. So I also want to do stuff kind of not always directly related to books. Like a video I've been wanting to do for so long is just deep dives into the Taylor Swift albums. I know that Christine from Poland Bananas Books has done that on her channel, and I love Taylor Swift, and I love these past 2 albums, or I guess past 3 albums, Folklore, Evermore, and now Midnights and everything, and like I've been really enjoying kind of analyzing the lyrics and getting into that, and I think it's really fun. I also kind of want to start doing more discussion videos about discourse in the book community, and I probably might do that on TikTok, or I have kind of started making TikToks. It's the same as my YouTube handle, Array of Reading, and I feel like that's a good place to kind of bring up points about discourse in the moment and kind of react to them as I see them. But like I said, I would like to do longer form discussion analyses about these topics. And yeah, it's just kind of like my New Year's resolution to get back into this and start, because I believe it has been 2 years since I made my last video. I really miss this community and I don't want to fully leave it, and I love talking about things with people. And yeah, so hopefully you'll start seeing me in the future. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my pre-med struggles and basically everything that's kind of led me to this place right now. If you want to see more of me, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!